This is episode 65 of Changing the Face of Yoga, and I have Lee Majewski as my guest, and Lee is heavily involved in providing retreats to people who have been diagnosed with cancer and are either in treatment or after treatment. It's a fascinating look at how these treatments affect us and how yoga can help. Let's listen. Hello, and welcome to Change the Face of Yoga, teaching toddlers through golden oldies. I'm very excited to be talking to lots of yoga teachers who will explain their passion for teaching yoga to students with different ages, physical fitness levels, wellness levels, and different goals. They will explain the benefits of yoga for these students and will be including teacher tips and pose modifications. I am Stephanie Cunningham of Yoga Lightness, and I've been teaching over 50s for 10 years. So this area is my passion and the passion of many other yoga teachers that you will be listening to in this series. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get started. Hello, this is Stephanie Cunningham. I have a wonderful guest today, I think an extremely interesting topic. Her name is Lee Majewski. And Lee is a certified yoga therapist, and she's a senior yoga therapist, and bear with me on this, Kavaladam, I think, Health and Yoga Institute in India. She has had cancer, and that led her to create some extremely interesting retreats for people that have been diagnosed with cancer and have had or are in treatment for it. And this has also grown into some retreats for people that have chronic diseases. And that's the kind of thing that we're going to talk about today, because I think it's a very interesting use of yoga therapy. Lee was invited as a plenary speaker to the International Association of Yoga Therapists, the Symposium on Yoga Therapy and Research in Dallas in 2014, to share the positive results of the program in India. She's also spoken at conferences in India, and she's been invited back by the IAYT. So she's a very knowledgeable person in this area, and we certainly want to know a bit more about it. So welcome, Lee. I think this is going to be a really fascinating podcast. Is there anything else you would like to add to that introduction?
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I'm really grateful, but no, not really. There's nothing really to be added other than I enjoy that my work now is not really work, but passion.
Yes.
I've done my career. I did my things to do and did my professional career. And now, since I retired, now is the time for my passion.
Excellent. I love that. I agree totally too. Okay, what I find really fascinating is that you've created and implemented a 3-week, is that correct, retreat
Yes.
for people to come in and, using the precepts of yoga, help them negotiate this extremely serious diagnosis and treatment. So could you, well, first of all, just tell me why you decided this was something that was needed?
Oh, because that was my experience. Because when I went through cancer and through the chemotherapy and radiation and went for my last checkup with oncologists, I was a wreck. I had no energy to walk even one flight of stairs. I couldn't walk 50 meters. It was like unsurmountable distance. My brain wasn't working, so I had a severe chemo brain. And I went to him and he said, well, we did everything we could. Now you can go and live your life. And I looked at him and I'm thinking, where's life? So there is a tremendous gap in healthcare system, which treats us with typically chemotherapy and radiation, and then leaves us out to dry because we are suffering severe side effects of the treatment, and yet we have no resources to know how to get out of that. When my husband had triple bypass, he would be released for home after 3 or 4 days, and then he had 6 months of intensive physiotherapy. We had nothing. And so not only nothing, but we also had no resources to find out. We often don't even know how bad we are because the side effects tend to creep on us because the treatment lasts long time. So it may last anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. And you going down and down and down, and you don't even notice that. And so I have now a lot of people who come to me after treatment. They don't even know how angry they are or how depressed they are,
Mm-hmm.
And there's nobody out there who would sit down and tell them, look, this is what you can do, and this is how you treat your fatigue, and this is how you get out of depression without any meds, and this is how you train your brain to come back to what it used to be. There's nothing like that available, comprehensive. And so that was just based on my personal experience. I thought there needs to be something, and hence the 3-week intensive residential program.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about that. So who's eligible to take this particular retreat intensive?
Anybody and everybody who's going through cancer journey. So typically, I will have people who just finish treatments, the allopathic, the medical treatments. And so we make no distinction. We take any cancer at any stage and work with people. But the groups are small because there's over 3 weeks, there's a lot of intensive and individual work that needs to be done. And there needs to be a particular individual care extended to everyone. So there's usually no more than 8 people and 2 or 3 facilitators living and breathing with a group.
Okay. And you said that people need to get counseling. Do you have a counselor there too, or is that part of your role?
Well, it's part of the role of yoga therapist.
Okay.
Yes, all of this is very intensive program for both the patients as well as the facilitators.
Okay. So exactly what would a day look like on one of these intensive retreats? So
the day starts quite early because it starts at 6:30 typically, or 6:45, and we do an hour asana and half an hour of pranayama. Mm-hmm. And then there's a break for breakfast. And then there's an hour and a half of lecture every day. And we talk about, impact of yoga on body, mind, and psyche and psychological impact and all this. We also talk about diet and carcinogenic factors in toxicity in diet and in lifestyle. And then in the 3rd week, they will do the life mandala, where they are looking at their own core belief system. And they decide if this is working for them or not. And if not, then they change it. Quite deep and meditative work that they do. So that's an hour and a half in the morning. And then we have half an hour of pranayama and half an hour of silent meditation. And then we go into lunch. And then after lunch, they have 2 hours break. And then we have an hour and a half of restorative yoga with mudras. And it's also led the guided meditation. Mm. And then there is yoga nidra. And then we have a short break and we go for dinner. And then there is, after dinner, at the end of the day, which is usually starts at 8 and finishes at 8:45, is half an hour chanting and silent meditation, followed by silent meditation. And that's the day. So the day is filled from early morning to late evening.
And it's very intensive. I mean, just everything that you've talked about. Are these people that have to know something about yoga? Because you're taking them through.
No. Yeah, we take them. So, cancer doesn't choose yogis or non-yogis. So I would have I would have yoga teachers sitting next to people who have never done yoga and who think that the yoga is asanas and or postures and that's it. So they really surprised that that they end up doing 6 hours of yoga every day. There is a lot of resistance at the beginning to meditation because people have a notion that the meditation includes non-thinking. We have to dismantle certain opinions and views. But it's very, very effective. But I have to say one thing, that the reason I'm saying it's very effective is because we have a proof of that. We do testing at the first day and the last day of the retreat, and then 3 months later. And we actually have data which measures the tension, the depression, the anger, energy levels, fatigue, and confusion. And so we see the difference between the measurable difference and very significant difference between first day and the last day. And they confirm it. In other words, the first day when they do tests, we then sit down with them and say, okay, so this is what you reported. And you have so much of anger, you have so much of depression, you have so much of tension. Does it feel about right? So they usually say, well, I don't think I'm that angry, but they are, and that anger is usually very deeply hidden. And then we sit down at the end of the retreat and say, is that how you feel? And they say, yeah, that's how we feel, totally different.
Yeah. And these are actually psychological tests, right? They're just not
these are standard. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
These are standard tests that were recommended to me by researchers, so they are standard tools for measurement.
Okay, good. All right. And you've been taking this research project for a few years now, haven't you? I mean, it has some.
It's my 6th year now.
Wow.
And so, so we measure now. We have a third research going on where we started to measure first day, last day, and then 3 months later, 6 months later, and 12 months later, just to see whether they are able to maintain the levels that they've achieved, because during those 3 weeks, at the end of the 3 weeks, they're really flying. And so we wanted to know if what we recommended to each one of them to take home, and most of them, they do. We have about 80% of showing that they still are actually practicing what we taught them after 3 months. So we now want to know whether they are maintaining that for 6 months and 12 months.
And do you have any data on that yet?
I think at the end of gathering 12 months data.
Okay.
Yeah, so something should come up within the next 6 to 12 months on that. We've already published 2 papers.
Excellent. That's great.
Yeah.
We'll be looking forward to seeing what you found, because I think that's the really hard part, is to maintain that after you're not in that intensive environment.
Yes.
So it'll be interesting to know. But so what is, one, the research showing, but 2, what are the people talking about their benefits from this retreat?
Well, they benefit. Let me quote you. Somebody who came from France, he was at the stage, he still is actually, at the stage 4 of colon cancer. And he signed in quite early, about 3 months before the retreat started. So he was waiting for the retreat. And at the end of the retreat, he said to me when he was leaving, he said, I was trying to survive long enough to come to India for this retreat. And now, 3 weeks later, I'm going back to a new life. And that I would say, and that's what the retreat gives people. It moves them, and I think that's what yoga gives people. It moves from victimhood a position of victim, which is very much encouraged by the conventional healthcare system, where doctor has a power and doctor tells you what to do, where to do, and how to do it. And so they come with this sense of victimhood, and yoga takes them from victimhood to empowerment, so that they now suddenly feel that how they feel and the quality of their life depends on what they do and which tools they use in different situations. And I think this is tremendous power that is given to them.
Yes. Well, it gives them a sense of agency, doesn't it? That they actually have some control over this, which...
Absolutely.
And I've talked to other yoga therapists who are working with people with cancer, and I hadn't really thought of this, but they were saying how it's always kind of there because, you know, you're always going to the oncologist, or you're waiting for your 5 years or your 10 years or whatever, where your risk becomes equal to the general population, but that's always there. So are what you're giving them helping them with that kind of fear? Because that's kind of scary to think at any time it could come back and you have to go through all this again.
Yeah. So and also it is in concert with the levels of depression that people usually have after the treatment. And so if you would ask me how it happens, I don't know. But I know that being in this retreat and doing yoga for 3 weeks takes the severe depression into negligible levels. I have no idea how it happens, but it happens almost for everybody. You know, out of many people, maybe 2 or 3 people who were really so invested in being depressed that they didn't want to come out of it. But other than that, it's amazing. If you could see the change in the faces and change in the posture and in the eyes that they have at the end of the retreat, it's like giving them totally new life. It's fantastic.
Wonderful. I was reading something about a lady who, unfortunately, was quite young, had breast cancer, went through a chemo series, and then unfortunately had to do it again. But she was talking about journaling and all of the tools that you had given her to help her. So could we talk a little bit about what kinds of things you give to people to help them when they're out of the intensive environment?
So let me step back a little bit, because before they go out, there's typically a certain cycle that is happening over the 3 weeks. And I want to mention that first. Okay. And then I'll tell you exactly what we do. So when they come for the first week, they get, you know, some people never did yoga. So they get used to routine, get used to place, to the diet, and to the schedule, and to each other, because then it's a group. Everybody is doing everything together, and the sharing is together. So as they come near the end of the first week or the beginning of the next week, the yoga that we do starts working. And usually they hit a bottom. They hit a crisis. In other words, all the hidden stuff that they were hiding out under the carpet or not wanting to deal with would come up. And they go into second week, which is very difficult, because this is the week where they have to face their own demons. And we give them the tools. We teach them how to approach things that are happening. So, for instance, at one of the retreats, at the end of the first week, actually on Sunday, I had a knock at 4:00 in the morning, and here was my patient in a full panic attack, saying she was dying, that her cancer is back, and she has exactly the same feeling. She was in full panic attack. And so I sat with her for about 2 hours, and we were breathing, because I couldn't even talk to her. She wouldn't accept anything. She was so into that. So we started to breathe. And first we started to simply deepen the breath. Then we started to use different breathing techniques just to bring that panic and that fear under the control. And then I asked the doctor to measure, the life signs, and she was perfectly okay. It was just a matter of the mind working. So I did. I've asked her to go back to her room and do a certain more breathing techniques. And she was okay. She was okay. The next time she had, and that was the end of second week, she had exactly this, woken up at 4 o'clock, exactly with the same fear and the same panic attack. She used the same tools that I worked with her on the first week, and she was able to manage that attack by herself.
Oh, great. Excellent.
Yeah. And so this is, in different people, the crisis or the difficulty manifests in different ways. So I cannot tell you that this will work always and this will work always, because it's always a very individual approach. But the second week is the week where they are facing their demons and they are using specific tools in order to be able to manage these different states, emotional or mental. And then by the third week, we teach them how to manage their thought patterns. We all have sort of a routine thought patterns that we get into, which often are very negative. And so we teach people how to manage those thought patterns that are not conducive to their health, that are negative. And so by the third week, they feel so empowered that now they are afraid, and there's the fear coming up. How am I going to take it home? And so we work with them individually, recommending their own sequence of practices, which include asanas, include meditation, which include pranayama or breathing techniques. We give them recorded files so that they can do yoga nidra, or they can do yoga, restorative yoga with meditation. And we sit down and we plan how to, obviously they're not going to go back and do 6 hours of yoga every day, but they can do an hour or 2 hours every day. They can find the time, and we help them to plan that. And that's where we find that because they feel empowered, now they feel so motivated not to lose what they gained, that they're actually doing the yoga practices even a year later.
Let me just segue, because we're coming to the end of our time, but you also do a retreat for chronic diseases. Is this a similar kind of retreat in that what you've just explained about, the first week, second week, third week, and then having a very unique practice for each individual to take forward? Okay.
Yeah. Right. Our research showed that it's so effective that we decided to extend it to non-communicative diseases, and it proved, again, very effective. Now, I have to say that currently I'm working diligently on taking that beyond cancer retreats around the world to English-speaking countries. So, for instance, we started to offer it in Australia, in Rockland Ashram in Victoria. In 2017, we had one retreat in 2018, and now we're planning another one for 2019, offering a retreat in September in Europe for European countries of patients. And then in May next year, I will start it in Canada for North America. So I also came back from, so to speak, from India and settled finally back home so that I can focus more on North American market.
Okay. So if someone was interested in one or more of these retreats, would they go to your website to find out about them? Is that the best way?
Yes. Okay. Yes, that's the best way, because the most recent dates are there, and the places that retreat runs are there, listed there.
Okay. So I'm going to give people your contact details so that they will know how to find out about these retreats in their area.
Sure.
And the website is www.yogaforhealth.institute. And
That's correct.
The email is info@yogaforhealth.institute. Facebook is Cancer Detox. Is there anything that in the few minutes we have left that you would like to talk about that we haven't talked about, or that you would like to expand a bit on?
Well, I'm looking for now, because I'm now in Canada, I'm looking for people to help me to spread this around the world because it's so needed. There's nothing like that available really that would address that specific niche, that is the specific gap that is there in healthcare. And so it's very, very needed and it's very beneficial. So I am looking for yoga therapists that would be interested and could help me to spread this in different places, as many places as possible.
Okay, great. Lee, I really want to thank you. I think what you're doing is really unique and really needed. And I'm really happy that you agreed to be on the podcast and that we got together. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for that wonderful interview. If you would like to be a guest on Changing the Face of Yoga, please go to my website, www.yogalightness.com.au, and under the Changing the Face of Yoga tab, you can complete Be Our Guest form. After reviewing the form and finding it applicable to this podcast, we will send you a link to schedule an interview. Please download, review, and tell your friends of any podcasts that are of interest to you and to them. If you would like to contact me, send an email to info@yogalightness.com.au. And thank you for listening to Changing the Face of Yoga.